Hello everyone. This video will be going over creating synapses in BlenderNEURON. If you haven't used BlenderNEURON before, I was just checking out the previous tutorials first, starting with the installation tutorial. I'll include a link to that in the description. The link to download the Hawk file I'll be using, samplecell.hawk, will also be in the description. Before starting Blender, make sure to load your model in Neuron and start BlenderNEURON. Here's what I did in the terminal on the screen if you want to copy the steps. It's mostly the same as the editing cells tutorial, but note that this time I've instantiated the cell twice. So now I'll navigate to the BlenderNEURON tab. Before I import the cells, I have to add them to groups. So I'll expand cell groups and cells in group. And we have one group here, but to create synapses, the cells have to be in separate groups. The form synapses section will only appear once I have at least two groups. So I'll click this plus to add a group. And with the group selected, the cells with a check mark next to them are the cells currently in that group. So with group 0 selected, I can uncheck sample cell 1, switch groups, check it off, and now there is one cell in each group. I can rename the groups, but I'll just keep them as group 0 and group 1. I can also make the cell groups different colors to differentiate the cells in the render. To do that, with the cell group selected, click to expand Cell Group Options, and then next to Initial Color, click the color block to set a color for all of the cells in that group. And then the next time the cells are imported, they will have those colors. Now currently, the cells are directly on top of each other, so it looks like there's only one cell. But on the object menu on the top right, I can select Sample Cell 1, and then press G and then Y to move it up the Y-axis, and then save the position. Now let's go to the Form Synapses section. And if you can't find it, remember that the Form Synapses tab will only appear when you have at least two cell groups. So first select the source cell and the destination cell groups, and the groups have to be different. I'll set the destination cells to group 1, which includes this pink cell. So the signal will go from group 0 to group 1. You can also make the synapse reciprocal by checking this box, is reciprocal, which will make the synapse two-way, but I will leave it unchecked. Then here next to synapse, I can select the synapse mechanism. By default, Neuron will let you add a basic excitatory synapse, which you can leave as expsyn. But if you have any additional mechanisms loaded in Neuron, you can put the name of those synapse mechanisms here. And I will include a link in the description going over how to compile mod files and add mechanisms to Neuron. But for now, I'll just leave this as expsyn. Then next to sections, you can select which sections on these cells will form these synapses. If I use asterisks, it will include all the segments with those characters in the name. So any segment with apic or dend in the name. And you can check what the segments on your cell are called from Blender by importing the cell by section. And then when you select one of these sections, it will give the name on the bottom right here. In this cell model, the compartments have been grouped so that the basal dendrites are labeled dend and the apical dendrites apic, and the soma is its own group called soma. So these are apic, so we want the apic segments on group 0 and the dend segments on group 1. So we can leave these as they are. Then there's other settings here. You can put in neuron parameters like synaptic delay, firing threshold, and synaptic weight. Then max proximity distance is going to be how close segments have to be to form a synapse. Currently, points closer than 5 microns will form a synapse, but you can increase this value to increase the search radius. And max synapses per point is going to be how many synapses one 3D point can form. Now I'm ready to see where the synapses will form by pressing Find Synapse Locations. Now you can see on the bottom it says found 78 synapse locations, and it displays where those are with orange lines. And that looks good, so I'll save these synapses in Neuron by pressing Create Synapses. So now if you run simulations in Neuron, the synapses will be active. I can also save the synapse set to a JSON file by selecting Save Synapse Set to JSON file, and then just downloading that to my device. That's it for this tutorial. Thank you for following along. Other tutorials can be found on blenderneuron.org/tutorials, and there will be a written version of this one on docs.blenderneuron.org under Getting Started.